name's Adam.
Nice to meet you.
And you're Pastor Ben.
That's right.
Ben Zornes. So I just had like a few things to ask. We're kind of our church is newer, I guess, not fully new, but I, as a newer Christian, got to help plant the church for the very first church I ever went to, which is the one I'm going to now, Covenant Presbyterian Cochrane, and that was during COVID. And so I guess being in a conservative Reformed church, I learned quite a bit in a very short amount of time. Sure. I'm still learning.
Nothing like learning on the job.
Oh, it's crazy. And we started the church actually in Kevin's house, who was going through his ordination today, and then we eventually moved to my karate club and had the church there for a while, and now we actually are in a building, which is nice. But kind of that's my history, I guess. So could you give us like a brief background on who you are and where you serve and how did you become a pastor?
Yeah, I grew up in Colorado mostly. My dad was a youth pastor. From a pretty early age, I heard the stories of like Jim Elliot and other missionaries like that, and was very odd in the sense that I said, that's what I want to do, that sort of thing with my life. And in my teen years, early 20s, did all sorts of ministry, worship leading, youth ministry, mission trips, that sort of thing. And as I matured more and more, studied the Word more and more, realized that the church is God's mission for the world, is God's means whereby He's fulfilling His purpose in the world, and the church needs. I was looking at early 2000s evangelicalism, going, something is missing, and I noted that the principal thing missing was robust pastoral ministry, robust preaching, and so that led me to kind of retool. I'd not gone to seminary, so I retooled and went to Greyfriars in Moscow, Idaho. Did my master's at New St. Andrews College. Was working at Christ Church in Moscow, and then in the last couple of years, as Christ Church is planting churches, I became the lead pastor for one of their church plants, Livingstone Reformed Church.
Oh, that's awesome.
Church that I'm the lead pastor of. So that's the nutshell version of my story.
I mean, I didn't know how any of this worked, and then I went to a Presbyterian meeting. I think it was last year in Moscow.
Okay. Yeah.
And I got to meet Pastor Doug Wilson, which again I told him the only time I ever saw him was with a rectangle around his face at my house. So it was an eye opener for me. Yeah. Growing up in I always told people now that I've been saved and I've come to faith in Christ, that I would have grown up diet Christian, I guess you could say. My great grandparents, my grandparents were very active in the church and strong believers. And then my grandma and grandpa on my mom's side, before they passed, none of their children, maybe one, was walking with the Lord. Yeah. And then now 3 of the 4 are. Yeah. And one of them being my mom, who, I think her prayers had quite a bit to do with me coming back to the faith, coming to the faith. So it's just interesting to see this and be here in this atmosphere. What would you say is, I mean, I don't know how much you know about Canada, but one of the questions I've been asking a lot of people is, right now, what do you think the most important thing for the church to be doing in Canada is? Where we are, we're such a secular country. I think we're further down the road than almost anywhere in the States. I'd say we are one of the more evil regimes that the planet has to offer right now. I know that sounds like hyperbolic, but I truly believe that. So what do you think, step one for us as a church here in Canada, what do you think our main thing should be focused on?
Well, I think first off, you're in a really good spot because there's opposition.
Yes.
Because you have clear battle lines. I was speaking with someone last year somewhere else in the world, and they were in an area that's predominantly Christian and very historically Christian, and they're in a spot where they have no resistance to Christian ideals and values and that sort of thing. But there's a lot of just sort of nominal Christianity. And they were asking, how do we have some fights? The right sort of battle lines. So in that respect, Canada is, you've got the enemy right where you want them. Yes. The battle lines are clear, and that's a real blessing. But as far as what do you do first? I'm preaching through Nehemiah, and one of the things that's striking in Nehemiah's story, in chapter 3, it's one of the boring chapters of the Bible, but it's actually quite profitable. It's Nehemiah listing out all the work the work crews on the wall.
Oh yeah.
And you might be that's one of those chapters you might be tempted just to go like, okay, there's a bunch of names, let me just skim past it.
Yeah.
The thing that struck me when I preached through it a number of weeks ago was you have it starts with the priests and they're on their section of the wall, and then it goes on to this group of people on this section of the wall closest to their house, and then you have people from outside of Jerusalem come in and help. They work on the Tekoites work on two sections of the wall. You have a man and his daughters listed as working on the wall. You have merchants and apothecaries and goldsmiths, priests, rulers, average Joes. But the thing that's striking in all of that is not just that it's all variety of people of God working on the wall, but they were working on the part of the wall that was closest to their home. And I think that's really instructive, is that part of the wall needs fixing. And here's my house, and I need to take responsibility for what's right in front of me. And that's so to answer that question, I think the average citizen going, what can I do to change the federal government? Well, not a lot. What you can do is be a faithful husband and wife and father and mother and employer or employee. Like, there's a lot of good you can do right at your section of the wall. It's not in far off capitals or places of power. God will raise up mighty men of valor for those purposes. But your job is to man your station.
It's kind of like, don't run your tap too long. You're going to affect the rainforest in Brazil or something, right? So, so that makes a lot of sense. I mean, recently I actually had a conversation about this very thing where, I do think it's important for us to have missions and people going around the world, and there's callings for people everywhere. But a lot of times we forget that how far our country's fallen. Like, we're going to evangelize in Canada. We have tons of churches that are going Mexico or wherever else in the world. But like, our towns, our cities, our neighborhoods are far worse, at least spiritually, than some of those places are. And that's a good point. Just to don't forget to put on your own seatbelt, maybe.
Right.
Before you
on the airplane, put your oxygen.
Can't save anybody if you're not breathing, right? What would you say is the most important thing for Christians when they're educating their kids? I understand that most of us are, most people want to homeschool or private, conservative Christian schooling. But let's say you're living in more of like a Babylon situation where your kids they're let's say it's more difficult to do that, or you're not in a position to do that. How would you go about it, just as a thought experiment, helping to educate your kids if they were in a more public setting?
Sure. Well, first off, I'd just note that it is the duty of fathers to raise up their children in the nurture and admonition of the Lord, the whole counsel of God. It's the father's task, principally, to do that. And that some of that is caught, not taught. So being a gentle, firm father who speaks lovingly to his children, sternly when necessary. A lot of that is a father in particular being the thermostat of the house, not just a thermometer saying, oh, I'm really disappointed my kids are all misbehaving. Too bad I can't do anything about it. Well, he needs to take responsibility, and he needs to be the bright, warm fire that warms the house through joy and through love and attention of his children, so that they want to hear what he has to say. When they're old, they'll not depart from it. So a father is, first and foremost, is creating a culture within his home, not in order to be isolationist from the rest of the world, as Paul says in 1 Corinthians, where he says, you're not going to be able to have no interaction with worldliness. Otherwise, you're going to have to leave the world. But what Paul is getting at there is, we want to be the sort of families and churches and Christian communities that have an immune system to be able to quickly identify falsehood, lies, lust, greed, avarice, all the false gospels that are out there, and that principally comes from a father creating a Christian culture in his home, um, and then in a setting where um, if your kids were in a public school, I think that just means you have no wiggle room.
Yeah.
And you need to do everything you can to get them out of there and take the risks to not have pagans teaching your children, instructing your children, because they're going to teach your children pagan things.
Of course.
So long as they're there, assuming running that scenario, while they're there, that means for a father, you've got not just your day job, you've got another job at night and in the mornings. Like you've got a lot of ground to make up. That you can't sit on your hands for 1 second until you, and even once you were to get them out, doesn't mean then you can sit on your hands.
No.
Right. But no time to waste. In other words.
Yeah. So I found that being part of the church I'm in, I learned a lot about discipleship. Where my pastor, Pastor Chris Cousin, he really has walked me through everything from start to finish, and he's never stopped doing that. Like, and I've found now, apart from like being in a Paedo Communion church, which I love. I didn't know what those things were when I joined, but and now I've full and wholeheartedly agree with those things. But I've noticed when I've gone and visited other churches before that there seems to almost be like a separation from the pulpit to the average person, where I don't want to sound rude, but sometimes I feel like I'm going to listen to like a Jesus TED talk.
Sure.
And then there's small groups and there's all these activities at a lot of churches, but there's not a lot of education and growing. So what's your opinion on, like I'd say the responsibility maybe, or the job of the elders' leadership in a church to disciple the flock that's in front of them? Like, how would you go about that? And what do you think is the responsibility, and what do you think is maybe not under that umbrella?
Sure. Pastors are called to be shepherds, and Acts 20 tells us that Paul says to the Ephesian elders, "You'll be made to give an account of these this flock that is under your care, which God purchased with His own blood." Which means you need to be able to count your flock. You need to be able to know them, and that imagery of shepherding is personal. It's relational. It's not. At the same time, it doesn't blur the lines. A pastor is not the husband of each of each household, or the father of each household, but he is to care for the households in that respect, to make sure that the members of those households are not wandering, which means he needs to know them, know their names, know their kids' names, be able, as you were saying, to not go, here are the sins of our far off people. They're really bad sinners over there. He needs to know, what are the sins of my flock? What are our proclivities? What are the sins on the third row of the church? Which necessitates talking with his folks, praying with them, being in their homes, having them in his home, so that he can best tailor the word to teach them the whole counsel of God and apply it in their particular contexts, vocations, trials, challenges. So.
Do you have a particular area of scripture or theology or just Christian lifestyle that you find is maybe the most interesting to you, or you specialize in the most, something that like is your biggest interest?
Oh, that's a I'd say that the one of my pound the table type things is making sure that our theology and our piety match up and are married. They live together. So it's what we think, what we believe, what we confess really does need to be lived out earnestly, sincerely, diligently. So that's the sort of thing that I want to be talking about all the time, preaching about, applying studying in order to explain the difficult doctrines in such a way that encourage the saints, enable the saints to live righteous lives before God in true faith. So that'd be the main thing that gets me up each morning is that sort of thing.
So this is a question I find interesting. I've heard a number of different pastors give their recommendations, but outside of like the Bible or maybe a good commentary, are there 3 to 5 books that you could think of that were like, read these, this is going to help you a lot?
My usual go-to answer for that sort of question is C.S. Lewis's The Great Divorce would be high on my list because that imagination of are you willing to give up everything to get heaven? Will you give up all to gain Christ, as Paul says? So that one's really good, and it's just vivid and colorful, and it's Lewis, so you can't hate it.
No.
The second one would be A.W. Tozer's The Knowledge of the Holy, which somebody gave me when I graduated high school. An ugly old cover, terrible looking book, but it was. I read it that year after graduating high school and was just blessed by the greatness of God, the majesty of God, walking before God in fear and reverence. That Tozer was just particularly gifted at articulating in a very devotional way. And then I really love Andrew Murray's book on humility. It's a wonderful, especially for pastors or for guys that are, for everybody. We're all tempted to pride, and his book on humility is just, it kicks you in the teeth very gently.
I can't remember which book that Chris gave me, but every time he gives me a small book,
those are the ones that pack a punch.
Well, Pastor Wilson's father wrote one on bitterness.
Yeah, the How to Be Free from Bitterness.
And that one, it took me 3 months to read it because I would turn a page and I'm like, I needed the time to sit with it. And and then there was another one on pride, and I can't remember whose book it was, but it was like, it's like got to be 30 pages long. And I've been like going through it because I try to, if I get convicted by something, try to work through that while I'm in that moment, so I don't kind of leave it and just finish the book and then put it away. And so that pride one where I thought, I can't be that prideful of a person. I'm like, every one of these things is every one of these problems. That's me. Yep. That's interesting. So I guess the last question I'd have for you, is there a favorite either book or passage or verse in the Bible that you would say, or even just something right now that's sticking with you at the moment that you find really...
Well, like I said, I'm preaching through Ezra and Nehemiah, so that's kind of like where my focus of study has been recently, and that's been really profitable and rich. But I think it's in Song of Songs. There's a wonderful verse there that says, "I've found the one my soul loved. I've found him and will not let him go." I think it's just that's the motto of the Christian life: is I found the one my soul loves. I found all things in Christ. I've found him and will not let him go. And there'll be all sorts of temptations to pull you away from Christ. And the believer, grasps him and says, I'm not letting go. I've found the one who's altogether lovely. And as I think about my own life, ministry, family, I go, I want to be known for being that sort of guy, that sort of Christian that holds to Christ for all I'm worth, and knowing that he holds me.
That's awesome. That's really good. Well, thanks for your time. Thank you. I don't want to keep you too long, but thank you for sitting down.